My name is BenTzion's. I'm the owner of TechYidCo, LLC, and the creator of the Shabbos Safe Hot Plate. This is my story. This is my story of how Hashem and Teshuvah has brought me out of the darkness of addiction and more and more. I wasn't born Jewish, actually. Don't let the beard fool you. I was born on a horse and cattle ranch in Colorado. I'm a Jewish convert. In fact, my family had been ranchers for many generations. My mother's family tree shows that they've been here, moved from back east in the 1700s to Missouri to Kansas to Colorado in the 1800s. I have a great-great-grandfather named George Washington Lauterbach. They named him after the first president. My father's side of the family had been ranchers for 4 generations. My great-great-grandfather moved out of the Sand Hills of Nebraska and purchased the ranch in the southeastern corner of Colorado. My father was also a raw fur dealer. That means during the winter, he was actually the largest raw fur dealer in southeastern corner of Colorado. He would buy fur from all your local trappers and ranchers and sell directly to a coat maker in New York. During the summer, he would rodeo. He was a kef roper. For those who don't know what kef roping is, it's when you actually ride a horse as fast as you can go to catch a kef with a rope. You jump off the horse, you run after the kef, you throw the kef down, and you tie him down as fast as you can. Those that do it the fastest are the winner. And my father was actually the 1985 champion kef roper back then. So a real cowboy, yeah. I had a normal American childhood, no Jewish influence whatsoever. I mean, some of my family members are Christian, but looking back on it, I I don't think I could ever, yeah, I wasn't into religion, put it that way. And looking back on it, I had addictive tendencies back then, but basically my philosophies, my deeper thoughts in life evolved like most American kids from movies and from popular culture, whatever was popular at the time. No real direction or meaning. In fact, later in life, I had such a adamant distrust in organized religion. I have a tattoo on my shoulder that says Leviticus 19:28. That's the verse in the Old Testament, or for those who know Chumash, that's Vayikra, that says do not get tattoos. So that's where I was in my life. Later in life, I was married. I had a daughter, and we were financially independent, which allowed me to do things like collect classic cars, classic Chevys, motorcycles. I built my own ultralight aircraft, which is a hang glider with wheels, a 2-stroke, 2-cylinder motor propeller behind me, and yeah, anything that I could tinker on that goes fast was what I was into at that time. My addiction was present at that time. In fact, that's when I first really got in. That's when I started to get into trouble. Not first, but that's when I started to get in trouble. I got a possession charge, and my wife separated from me, being the intelligent woman that she was. And that's when I tried my first maiden voyage in the ultralight. I adjusted the pitch of the wings wrong. And basically what happened is when I took off, I was doing on my runway in the field on the side of my farm, and I went over backwards, landed nose first. The motor broke through the framework and crashed into my spine and shattered 2 vertebrae. So I was in a body cast from my neck to my waist for 6 to 8 months. I was in a wheelchair, and I was on some pretty heavy opiates. So my addiction did not get better, did not get better. In fact, when I got out of the cast, or I was in a Velcro suit for even longer than that, I started getting into more possession charges because actually one time I even overdosed, and my addiction was so bad I was clinically dead in the back of a police car on the way to the hospital, and they brought me back at the hospital, Baruch Hashem. But I don't have any fantastic story of that. It was darkness. I don't remember much about it, but that's how bad my addiction had got at its worst. And the thing is, though, at that point in time, I could afford a decent lawyer, and the lawyer kept cutting deals with the court system, saying if he stays out of trouble, we'll do less. But after a while, I was able to get into a lot of trouble, and in that foggy reality of my mind, I didn't go to court. I decided I was going to avoid the court system altogether. But that's where my life changes. That's where my story changes. Uh, I had a spiritual experience, and bear with me on this. I usually don't tell this story, but my wife today, Baruch Hashem, she says I really need to tell this part of my story. Uh, my life had gotten so bad that I was living in a van. I was homeless. I was penniless. I scraped up enough money to get a hotel and a shower. I was staying in a hotel at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was pondering thoughts about how bad my life had gotten. I felt an energy slam into my chest, pin me to the bed, and flow out through my fingers and toes. Uh, that experience left me so clear-headed, for several days I can't even put into words some of the experiences that I experienced. Uh, I became aware of something arguing over my existence, of whether I deserved to be on this earth or not. I came to the realization that I'm still here, and that some people aren't so lucky. There are people walking this earth that are the sum of their averot, their sins. They are no longer there. Now, I don't have anything to back this up. This is just what I felt, my story. And that left me no doubt that there is something more than myself, and that I am responsible for every thought, speech, and action that I do on this earth. And that's the reality. And in the last few days of that clear feeling, it pointed me directly to Judaism. And so I'm fixed, right? No, my life didn't get better right away. My life did not get better right away. I still had to face the legal consequences of what I'd been doing, and I still had an addiction. But Hashem had plans for that as well. Yeah. I made plans to see my daughter. My estranged wife and my daughter lived at the top of a hill, and as I was driving up the hill, a car swerved into my lane and caused me to lay my Jeep on its side. I knew that was it. The police were coming. I had a warrant. It was time to face what I had coming. So I told the person who had seen the accident that I needed to go say goodbye to my daughter. I ran up the hill to their house. I hugged my daughter goodbye. I explained what had happened to my estranged wife, and I went back down to the accident. And Baruch Hashem, that day, that day, was the last time that I had abused any kind of illegal drug or prescription medication. And that was over 10 years ago. Clean and sober, after my experience, I started writing to rabbis. Why Judaism? Like I said, I just basically, like I said, the experience pointed me directly to being Jewish. I can't explain it. But I did. Through snail mail, I wrote to several rabbis. I wrote to an Orthodox rabbi, a Reform rabbi, a conservative rabbi. At that time, I didn't know the difference. Like I said, I didn't know anything about Yiddishkeit, about Jewish religion, whatever. But Baruch Hashem, the Orthodox rabbi was actually a good rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel Spritzer in Crown Heights. And he wrote me a really good letter, a really nice long letter that explained to me that, first he said, you don't want to be Jewish. You don't need to be Jewish to have a relationship with Hashem. but he encouraged me to study. He sent me a book, the Divine Code. That's the laws of the seven mitzvot of the Bnei Noach. In other words, the seven mitzvot of the non-Jew, or the sons of Noah. And he also sent me a copy of the Tanya and encouraged me to study. I also studied the Tanakh, and from front of the cover to the end. And with a group of friends, I started studying biblical Hebrew from a book called My First Hebrew Primer. One thing that became obvious to me right away, studying the seven Noachide mitzvahs, especially in about the emes, the truth of Judaism, is how the church incorporated things that are completely not allowed into their service. Things as simple as having a bloody crucifix in front of you when you daven. Things as simple as taking of the sacrament, which represents a korban of avodah zarah. And at that time, what's really interesting, it has really nothing to do with it, but it really convinced me. I watched a documentary on Isaac Newton. Everybody knows Isaac Newton was a little bit out there, but Isaac Newton was also a student of Kabbalah and of the Jewish religion. And at that time in history, you were expected as a person of any status to own a seat in the church. And it was known, it's recorded in history, that he would go to church, but he would leave in the part of the service just before taking of the sacrament. And I was like, ah, he knew. So yeah, also Hasidic teachings, studying the Tanya. I can't claim that I understand the Tanya, and I especially didn't back then, because I mean, I'd had no Jewish background whatsoever. But what the Tanya did teach me is that I had a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination. And what it also taught me is that it's my avodah, it's my service to Hashem to fight that Yetzer Hara, to overcome it. And that my daily existence, as long as I'm doing that, I'm doing what I should be doing. I also studied Jewish history, and that convinced me even more of the truth behind the Jewish religion. I mean, there is no reason why the Jewish people should still be on this earth. There is no. What other nation in the world do you know that in every generation there's some other nation that wants to completely wipe them out, and they are still here? Also, that brings you to that question: what would cause an entire nation's evil inclination to hate the Jews, unless the Jews themselves were bad for business for the evil inclination? I mean, that's my way of looking at it, and that's what sold me. After a few years of studying, I was no longer happy being a non-Jew. I was in a small, well, medium-sized university town in Oregon, and it only had one Orthodox synagogue. So one Shabbos afternoon, I knocked on the rabbi's door. The shul was actually in his garage, and they only davened on Shabbos, so it was very, very small. He opened the door. I poured my entire life story out to him. His name is Rabbi Derfler, and it was Ahavas Torah in Eugene, Oregon. And I told him, you gotta make me Jewish. You just gotta make me Jewish. I showed him that I could read Hebrew. I could read the Akeda from the Chumash, and that I've been studying, whatever. But I must have convinced him, because he didn't try to discourage me at first. He said, let me talk to my Rav, come back tomorrow. I came back tomorrow, and he says, oh yeah, I was supposed to discourage you, but yeah, we spoke to the Beit Din, we got a syllabus, and I started studying. At this point in time, I also decided to go back to school. I enrolled in the local community college there to study as an electronic technician. I got all A's and B's for my efforts. In fact, I was a member of the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Roll Society. Uh, but the Beit Din informed my Rav there, after studying for him with 8 months, that if I stayed in Eugene, which did not have a large community, they only davened on Shabbos in the rabbi's small shul, that it would take at least 3 years to convert. And that if I moved to a larger community in Portland, Oregon, then it would take less time, whatever the rabbi would decide. So I looked into transferring all my classes to college in Portland, Oregon, and that summer I packed everything up and moved to Portland. I was so happy to have a place to daven, Chakras, Minka, Mariv during the day that I showed up. And by the way, it's Kesser Israel and the amazing Rabbi Brodkin there. I asked him, I go, will you please finish my conversion according to the Beit Din? And he looks at his phone, says, I really don't have time right now. Whatever. And I read that book. I read that. I know you're supposed to discourage me. I didn't tell him that, but I know he's supposed to discourage me. So I kept showing up. I kept Chakras, Minka, Mariv. I kept showing up. And Baruch Hashem, I asked him again. I go, do you have time to finish my conversion? He'd look at his phone, and he'd act really upset, like I was annoying him. But it I was dedicated. I stayed and I davened and I showed up every day. And finally he said he would help convert me. So Baruch Hashem, at this point in my life, I'm going to school full time. I have 3 part-time jobs trying to pay bills. I'm a screen printer. I worked as mashgiach at a deli. I also worked as maintenance for the local Jewish preschool there, Chabad preschool. The thing is, though, is I had to pass a state and federal background check that all teachers and employees of schools have to pass. But Baruch Hashem, none of my charges were violent and they were not against my fellow man. There was nothing keeping me from working at the school, which was a great blessing, Baruch Hashem. I studied my syllabus that the Beit Din gave me. And the syllabus consisted of the laws of brachot, the laws of kashrus, how to daven as a Jew, 3 books on the yearly cycle of the Chagim, and 3 books on the laws of Shabbos. I know there's more, there's a couple more books anyways. And I became a real part of that community. It's an amazing, amazing community. The Beit Din, Baruch Hashem, that they used, because the rabbi there had a relationship, is the Beit Din of Havrav Michal Twersky, the Hasidic Beit Din in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, under the guidance of Rosh Kolel, Rosh Beit Din, Rav Mendelssohn Rovic. So my conversion has a good hechsher. Nobody questions it. After studying for another year, so basically it was a year and 8 months after I showed up on the rabbi's doorstep, I got the green light to go to Milwaukee. And during that time, I've been watching faithfully, like off of the internet, every shirim of Rav Michal Twersky and Rav BenTzion Twersky. I almost had their shirim memorized, looking forward to going to Milwaukee. I would even listen to their shirs while going to sleep. But anyways, I got the green light to go to Milwaukee. It was on the 4th of July. My plane landed at 3:30 in the afternoon. I got a taxi to the Kolel. I met with the Rosh Kolel, Rosh Beit Din. He called the other 2 members of the Beit Din. They called the Moil. I was really, really nervous, but they had me poked, sworn in, dunked, and wrapping tefillin by 5:30. I was BenTzion and I was Jewish. And I walked outside. There was fireworks in the sky. It was amazing. It was amazing. No pomp and circumstance, but I was Jewish. The very next morning, I got up for, I think it was the 5:30 chakras, and had my very first aliyah to I was Parshas Balak. So I returned to Portland, and I was able to study Gemara now that I was officially Jewish. So I started the new Daf Yomi cycle. I was still going to college. In fact, now it was suggested to me it's time to find a shidduch, a Jewish wife. So Orthodox Jewish dating's a little different. But anyways, I mean the dating pool for a late 30s convert in Portland, Oregon was really small. But while I was studying for finals at school, I kind of haphazardly filled out a profile in a brand new Jewish religious dating site, and they kept writing me letters saying, "We have matches for you. We have matches for you." And I was studying. I was aggravated. I said, "No, thank you. No, thank you." I wrote him a really not so nice letter. I said, "I'm a little bit too religious for this, for your dating site. Whatever. Please take me off your mailing list. I don't have time for this." And they said, "We're sorry to hear that. How about a free membership?" I said, "Okay, a free membership." So I finished my profile, and I put what Gadolim were on my wall, what my study habits were. I tried to be look as religious as frum as possible on there. And there was a nice Jewish lady in Queens, New York, which is now my wife. I seen her profile, same as mine. She barely filled it out, but she was Israeli. She seemed to have the same goals as mine, so I wrote to her. But the same as me, she didn't have a membership to this from dating site either, because it was brand new. There was nobody on it. So she could see that she got a message from me, but she couldn't read my message. So she showed my profile, Baruch Hashem, to her best friend at lunch, and her best friend said, "Buy a membership just to write him. He's the one." And thank goodness she did. Like I said, we talked for a few months. I flew to New York. I stayed there for 5 days, and we seen each other from chakras to midnight for 5 days straight. My Rav at the time was Rosh Kolel in Portland, Oregon, and his parents lived in Muncie. He was actually visiting his parents in Muncie. We rented a car. We drove to Muncie. We met with my Rav. Her Rav that she asked Shilas for is Rav Mizrahi. Yeah, and he was doing a shiur in Brooklyn. We drove to Brooklyn. We met with him after his shiur. We got his bracha. So we were engaged. Baruch Hashem. We were engaged. And I have to tell you, my wife's story is way more beautiful than mine. My wife is Israeli. She's of Ethiopian descent. Basically, she's of the tribe Beta Israel. She was the very first Ethiopian Aliyah. Her mother carried her and with her brother for 4 months through the Ethiopian and Sudanese desert to get to Eretz Israel during Operation Moshe. And Baruch Hashem, I'm amazed by her Avodah Hashem is truly out of ahava, out of love, where my past life scared me into my religious path, that we balance each other perfectly. My Rav, the Rosh Kolel of Portland, Oregon, Rabbi Fisher, he says, you need to move up there first. You need to get a job. You need to get an apartment. You need to be a good hatan and help with the wedding. I was scared. I was really scared. I mean, it was just before High Holy Days. How was I going to find a job? Explain to my non-Jewish boss that I needed the High Holy Days off. I needed 7 days Sheva Brachas off. I needed all this time off. But I did my Estadlis. I did my work. I flew my resume to every electronics job on Craigslist, basically. I wrote down that I had a shiny new degree in electronic engineering tech, and you can't tell I'm Jewish unless you're Jewish if you look at my resume, because basically BenTzion is in the email, and I use the Rosh Kollel as one of my references and everything. But I get a call from this Hasidic voice, and he says, "Well, when will you be in New York?" I said, "Such and such Monday." He says, "Well, that's the Monday after Rosh Hashanah." And I'm like, "Well, how do you know Rosh Hashanah?" And anyways, we're a Jewish company. He asked me some electronic questions, and that's it. I load everything I own, which isn't much at the time, into the back of my little Subaru car, and I drive all the way from Oregon, West Coast, to New York, East Coast. And actually, I'm driving through Ohio, and I get pulled over by a state trooper. The state trooper pulls my license, and he asked, "Is this your current address?" And I said, "No. If you look in the back of my car, everything's piled back there. Everything I own is in this car." He says, "Well, why are you going so fast? Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to New York. I'm going to get married. I'm engaged." And he actually looked and says, "That's a better excuse I've had all day." And he gave me back my license and didn't give me a ticket. Anyways, I make it to New York. I have a job interview that Monday. And Baruch Hashem, at Ashkaka Pratis, I got a job with an amazing Satmar family in Borough Park. That is still my job today. Rev Chacheskel Brock in Borough Park is where I started working. And my wife and I, we were living in Queens, and my wife gave me the gift of a beautiful Jewish girl. And I'm studying nights, I'm studying mornings, I'm going to work. Life seemed to be going good. Then there was a horrible tragedy in Brooklyn. There was a fire that killed several Jewish children, and it was caused by an unsafe hot plate. Orthodox Jews use hot plates on Sabbath so that they can keep their food warm, because cooking is not allowed on Sabbath. And they leave it plugged in for usually 26 hours, sometimes 3 days at a time. And my wife was crying, was heartbroken. We invested in smoke detectors. It was a troubling time for the Jewish community. I had friends ask me what hot plate should they buy, and I knew aren't any safe hot plates on the market for how Jews use a hot plate, because like I said, we leave them plugged in for an extended amount of time, and most wiring can't hold up to that. And I knew from back when I was going into college, I lived underneath a nice rabbi and rebbitzin, that they lived in the house above me, that their hot plate had broke down just prior to Shabbos, and the rebbitzin asked me if I could fix it. I opened it up, and what was inside was scary. The actual wire, it was porcelain, ceramic insulators around a heating element, and those insulators had broken, and the heating element had actually arc welded itself to the frame. I, it's yeah. Anyways, so I had friends tell me, "So why don't you make a better one?" I had the connections at work with the factories overseas and everything, so I drew a schematic of what I wanted my hot plate to have. I wanted it to have a stainless steel heating element. I wanted it to have electric circuit breaker, a thermal circuit breaker. I wanted it to be lifted up off of the counter so that it didn't heat up your counter on a 3-day Yom Tov. I wanted an industrial electrical cord. I wanted it stainless steel so that you could be kosherable. I wanted all these, and Baruch Hashem, through effort of my own and through mostly Hashgacha practice, not that much effort of my own, the factory fell in place. Everything fell in place to where I was able to get a sample unit from the factory of my design. I was able to get it ETL certified. I was able to get certification of the Beit Din of Crown Heights. I was able to get halakhic certification from the Vod of Oregon, where I was from, but I still didn't have the money to produce it. So I did what a lot of companies are doing now. I did an online internet Kickstarter. But then I realized half of my intended audience doesn't even use the internet. What am I going to do? The Kickstarter was a dud. There was no numbers whatsoever. And then I contacted Yeshiva World News. They let me put an article in Yeshiva World News. The numbers went stopped. Okay. I contacted, who else did I contact? The Jewish Press. Put something in there. The numbers went stopped. I contacted Chabad Lubavitch. They sent out an email for me. The numbers went stopped. I did a Jewish email blast. The numbers went and completely stopped. At the very end of the campaign, Mishpacha magazine did an article on my story and my wife's story. And Baruch Hashem, days before the end of the Kickstarter, we reached our $60,000 goal. With that money, I was able to start the patenting process. I was able to file a preliminary patent. I was able to start my company, the name Shabbos Safe Hot Plate, Shabbos Safe Hot Plate. And my company is TechYidCo LLC, so TechYid Company. The only thing is after that I soon realized like I don't have any way to import, warehouse, and distribute my product. And I was contacted. Everything seems to be Ashkaka Pratis. Everything just seemed to fall in place. This was obviously attended from Shemayim because I was contacted by Kosher Innovations. They're the Shabbos lamp people. They're in every Judaica shop, every Jewish hardware store or kosher store all over the United States and the world. And they offered to import, warehouse, and distribute for me. So Baruch Hashem, we got our first shipment. We were able to deliver to all the Kickstarter backers. We were able to get in all the stores. And Baruch Hashem, and it was time to make another order. But I wanted to make a few improvements because we got feedback from people, and I wanted to raise the temperature as much as I halakhically could and still be kosher certified by my hechshers. And I wanted to change the wire connections. The original wire connections that the factories used weren't at the standard that I wanted to use. So we weren't in stores for like another 8 months before we got everything taken care of, got the ETL safety certification again, and then we were in stores. We sold out in 3 months. It's amazing. It's amazing. So we have another order now. It should be back in stores in a month. We're doing better than I could have dreamed. The thing now, I actually have an idea. I patented it. Part of my patent for the Shabbos Safe Hot Plate is I also patented the idea of a changeable top to the hot plate. Basically, the stainless steel top you can take off, toivel it, put it back on. You can take it off, kosher it, put it back on. You can have one top for meat, one top for dairy, one top for parv. It's yeah. I'm also one of my next few plans. I want to make a water urn that has some child safety features. Plus, I have the idea of a circuit that you can have that would allow you to not have to switch it between Shabbos mode, Yom Tov mode, and regular mode. You can just plug it in, leave it, add water on Yom Tov, and it should be fine. But that's in the process. We're still working on that one. I still have my job in Borough Park. I live in Staten Island now, though, and I drive every day over the Verrazano. I drive a 30-year-old Harley Davidson Sportster. It's a little part of my past that I still have. Well, no, I didn't. I don't have it from 30 years ago. I just purchased it last year, but it's something. It's not that great. I have to work on it regularly, but that's part of the enjoyment. I explained to people that I changed 99% of my life to be a Torah observant Jew. And that motorcycle is a little mutar havalim, which translates, what is it? Permitted waste of time, basically, is what that means. And it balances my life. And plus, I like driving through Borough Park with the beard and this, and on a Harley Davidson. It's just fun. Things that are going on in my life, though, now. That's just one of the many miracles that has happened in my life. A while back, I met here in Staten Island the Biale Rebbe from Bnei Brak was visiting, and I was able to meet him in Yechidus, and it was a mamish amazing experience. Everything that came out of his mouth, he told me the things that I needed to improve on, and like things that there was no way he could have known that I wasn't doing. And when I left that meeting, I had a tiny bit of the feeling that I had when I had my spiritual experience over 11 years ago. It was just mamish amazing, amazing. Uh, but my greatest blessing today is my wife has blessed me with two amazing Jewish children. I have a girl, I have a boy. If I was to look at my life today, 15 years ago, I think it was boring. I think it was boring. I wake up at 5, I study Gemara, I go to the mikveh, I daven chakras, I go to work, I daven minka at work, I come home, I play with my children for as much as I can, and then I go and study in shul and daven Mariv until 10 o'clock every day on a good day, if possible. And I wake up the next day and I do it again. But that is the life I want. My work, because by doing that, my worries today aren't whether I'll use drugs or not. What studying Torah and doing Teshuvah has brought me so far from that, that's not ever even an option or even on my mind. In fact, today, my simple struggles are today, am I being a good father? Today, am I using my time wisely? Am I doing an honest day's work for my boss? That's my avodah Hashem. And I know these little things, they seem small, but they are kicking holes in the Sitra Akra. My Yetzirah hates it when I do these simple little things. And my struggle today is just to be a good Jew. And that's what I have. And that's my story. Thank you.